There was once a time when foreign movies were mostly dubbed, sometimes with hilarious results.
You talk tough. My friend, it's only hot air. It won't do you any good now.
You're mistaken. It's not hot air. 'Cause now I'm gonna show you my new kung fu. You are not gonna leave here alive.
What can you say about that?
Well, I have seen those boys grow up to be the men they are now, and I am aware that Bruno has a bad temper, and he's always been envious of Alejandro.
I know
madam.
that. But then to accuse him of such an unspeakable act. Alejandro's accusing his own brother of attempted murder. I'm horrified that he'd suspect such a thing of his own brother.
Of his half-brother.
But that blatantly unrealistic facet of movies was then almost universally replaced with another unrealistic facet. Completely mismatching reality again, yet widely accepted in both movies and games today, is the presence of written text on the screen. We listen to characters talk in other languages while we read subtitled translations at the bottom of the screen. This doesn't happen in life, and is no more real than the stupid voiceover dubs we used to watch. Some movies extend this process of presenting information in a completely unrealistic form by showing us split screens so we can see more than one event at a time. Others show scenes dissolving into each other, which doesn't happen at all in reality. Then we have other mismatches with reality, such as screen wipes, black and white footage, negative footage, slow motion, speeded up footage, and of course, mood music. How many times have you seen a fight in real life that was accompanied by drum rolls? These kinds of facets in film language are useful because they allow filmmakers to communicate, or sometimes impose, plot information and moods that otherwise would take much longer to communicate if the films were strictly conforming to reality. One of my favourite examples of this kind of unrealistic yet useful sensory communication is this scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, in which we're shown a red line representing a plane making a journey across a map, quickly establishing a location transition in the story. No dialogue, straight to the point, so to speak. With video games, the presentation of information overlaying the screen is essential. We have health bars, ammo counters, radars and all other manner of graphical displays to help us both understand what is happening and interact. It is entirely possible to make a game that does away with these informational displays, but imagine how frustrating it would be trying to anticipate how much health you have left during a fight. Although these kinds of details are things that don't happen at all in our daily experience of reality itself, we do process information in our minds using complex visual and auditory representations that in many cases are not unlike the menus and counters seen in video games. It's long been established that good spellers process words visually. They see the words in their mind's eye, whereas bad spellers are usually spelling phonetically and thus getting it wrong. I mean, you can't even spell phonetic phonetically. This is a key point in our study of so-called realism in games and movies. Our reality is not just about direct sensory input from the outside world. We also process information internally and represent that processing with internal imagery, sound and dialogue that is very unlike what we sense in the external world. Have you ever heard people speak in sensory metaphors such as feeling bright, not being able to grasp a concept, or hearing an idea that resonates with them? These aren't just sayings. They are very often representations of how people process information in their mind. In NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, these representations are called submodalities. Take a person who says that they want to get some distance from a worrying issue and have them visualize the thing that is bothering them on a distant TV screen in their mind with the sound turned low and the color saturated. And you'll often find that those individuals are then able to think more calmly and rationally about whatever it was that was bothering them. Movies and video games can tap into some of these internal information processing habits, thus connecting with us in ways that are much more meaningful than simply trying to imitate our external sensory experience. Yet another sensory break from reality, communicated through graphical displays, is that with movies and games we're able to adjust volume, brightness, and other details manually. So a gunshot or explosion that would be deafening in reality becomes easily bearable, and a bright light source like the sun becomes duller than a 40-watt light bulb. In fact, if you switch on your TV and look at black footage in the dark, it's still visible because it isn't actually black. The popularity of cartoons and CGI movies is also a strong indicator that realism is not an audience priority. Cartoons serve a function of reducing visual reality to a much simpler version that is probably closer to the way we create imaginary experiences in our minds. There is reduced texture and shading, much more simplistic environments, and exaggerated facial expressions and body language. Cartoons made for toddlers are excellent examples of what could be referred to as experience simplification. But that process is also at work in Pixar movies made for families, and in subtler forms is even present in the most mature movie content for adult audiences. Reality is a complex, cluttered experience, and so a key appeal of movies and games is that they offer an alternative experience that is simplified and condensed. Video games and movies also depart from reality by filtering out the vast majority of mundane and repetitive activities that make up most of human existence. And this isn't just true of the likes of James Bond, whom we never see trying to figure out his personal finances, or waiting impatiently to see a dentist or doctor, or simply getting tired or feeling emotionally traumatized after a fight to the death. The filtering applies to pretty much all lead fictional characters. So let's take a realistic drama such as the film American Beauty. Even though the film is about ordinary everyday people going about their little lives and all the drama and comedy that occurs within those lives, it still filters out a lot of the mundane aspects of their existence. We see a family argument over dinner, but didn't see anyone cooking dinner because that part was just too mundane to include. The story spans several days, yet we don't see anyone getting dressed in the mornings, and we only see one person taking a shower, but with the purpose of establishing his frustration in a sexless marriage. With historical epic movies, this filtering is multiplied. Huge passages of time are removed so that we see just a tiny fraction of a percentage of events that have been selected based on how pivotal, unique, interesting and stimulating they are. The problems that people face in pursuing goals in movies are usually directly related to the goal itself, such as competition from a particular enemy. But how often do we see a movie in which a character's journey is significantly hampered by some thematically boring everyday obstacle, like catching the flu, their mobile phone battery dying, their internet connection going off, not having enough change on them to make a phone call, having an allergic reaction, not getting a decent night's sleep, or simply needing to go to the toilet. These kinds of mundane common experiences can drastically alter the course of a particular day's events in a real person's life, but we tend to be disinterested in seeing them so much in movies. With video games, this filtering of the mundane occurs in a variety of ways. Take a game like Skyrim. Day and night cycles are speeded up, so you can play the game for 5 or 6 hours, yet several days and nights will pass while you play. Once you've bought a house in a city, you don't have to pay any taxes to the local monarch. You just live there for free, and you don't have to do any maintenance or repairs on your home like you would in the real world. In previous games in the series, your weapons and armor would gradually degrade with usage, and you'd have to repair them. But this more realistic trait was abandoned in Skyrim. So in Skyrim, your blades stay sharp forever and your armor never gets dented and nothing rusts. Presumably, this departure from reality was to keep the latest game in the series from feeling mundane. Despite the game visually featuring a variety of weather effects, the player is also completely unaffected by the cold and wet. Would it have made the game more fun if your character could catch hypothermia? You don't have to wash or iron your clothes, and the clothes you have seem to be made of some magical material that never fades or falls apart at the seams. You never trip over or sprain your ankle while walking rocky hills. And being that you don't leave any footsteps in the dirt, and because wild animals have no sense of smell, once your enemies lose sight of you, they're unlikely to track you down. Skyrim is a great game. I played it through and I loved it. So this isn't a critique of the game design. I'm simply pointing out that realism is both impossible and undesirable. Imagine having a bladder and bowel counter in the game. Terrifying enemies like mammoths, spiders, and 20-foot-tall cavemen would trigger your bodily functions, requiring that you sneak away and relieve yourself before doing battle. Although it would initially be funny, it wouldn't make for a better game experience in the long run. Another fave game of mine in recent years is Far Cry 3, which has been hailed for its open-world realism. Skyrim with guns, some have called it. You have to hunt animals for skins to craft weapon holsters, and enemies will search for you and set alarms off if they find the dead body of a comrade you killed. However, this is another instance in which attempts at realism in a previous game of the series were dropped. In Far Cry 2, your weapons would deteriorate with ongoing use, and would even jam during combat, but it made combat frustrating. Far Cry 2 also did away almost completely with menu screens by having everything show in your character's hands when using in-game maps and computer screens. That was an impressively realistic aspect of the game, yet it was dropped in the far more praised and successful sequel Far Cry 3. At the same time, Far Cry 2 and 3 did away with the imposing mutant monsters that were featured in Far Cry 1. It seems the game makers considered those monsters to be silly, but for me it resulted in a certain mundaneness in that your enemies throughout the entire Far Cry 2 and 3 games are just humans. Not unlike the extras in the Star Trek TV series, who seem to be marked for death by their red t-shirts.
Captain, I see something! That way, I never saw anything like...
On the other hand, Far Cry 3 did use hallucinogenic drugs as a plot device to justify some surreal montages and bits of gameplay, including a generic battle with a huge, graphically impressive demon. This was likely done to break the monotony of only fighting humans and animals, both of which offered little challenge once you unlocked the game's best weapons. I really would have liked to see some epic Far Cry 1 style monstrosities in the game, even if it meant having a plot that was unrealistic. Again, the pursuit of ever-increasing realism is often a hindrance in games and movies, and so Far Cry 3 was followed by a successful spin-off title called Blood Dragon, which dropped all the realism pretense by featuring old-school 1980s sci-fi clichés and, of course, monsters.